I may have had growing up a short little break from history, is what it felt like, but it's right. That break is over, and the anti-Semitism is everywhere, and it's inexplicable, right? To the superficially, no matter where you are, whether you're in Israel or around the world. Look, as Jews, God set us apart to be I'd like to say, the officer corps of humanity. Humanity was built with this tremendous need for God and for meaning and for truth. And the people of Israel, the Jewish people, were set aside to bring that to the world. So without us, it collapses, it falls apart. Now, you would think that they'd be throwing parades for us because we're saving them by teaching them about what life is all about, giving them meaning and happiness and joy, right? It's always amazing how Israel, despite the fact that we're constantly running into bomb shelters and having our neighbors killed by terrorists, is one of the happiest countries on earth. They believe that what we're teaching them is just no bacon and no lights and no this and no that, right? They think that what we're teaching them is constant restriction, and that's all. They don't see the depth and the joy that comes from a life that's connected to God.
The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?
Welcome to the Jew Function. I'm Leo.
I'm Seth. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Very good to be here. Very good to have so many shows, one after the other lately. We just had a live show last week. There was another great show that I recorded the other day. It was in Hebrew. It ended up being in Hebrew, by the way, but it's going to be either subtitled or we're just going to use the AI thing and put like English in his mouth. He's okay with that. So it was a really good one. I don't know if it's going to, by the time you're seeing this, it's going to already gone up or whatever the order is. We're on a roll again, and I'm enjoying that part of the work. I'm not loving the fact that anti-Semitism is still raging and all the uncertainty around the elections and all that, but I am loving the fact that we get to meet you and I, and then we get to meet some outstanding humans along the way. I mean, this has been, I think, the highlight of this project. You're muted, by the way, Seth, if you're trying to say something.
I have a lot to say. I wanted to wait.
You want to save it for
our new friend comes, but it's also, this is one of God's main strategies. The old I don't know what you'd call it in marketing, but he always does the bad. I'm gonna. I remember reading it years later, and I was like, that was always, the book always said that, I will harden his heart so I can show you myself. I was like, oh wait, he did the whole thing, just so that he could show his tricks. I didn't realize the whole time that he was pulling the strings of all of the characters. Hopefully what we're interested in is figuring out a way to not have to go through the tragedies in order to do that. Nevertheless, we constantly see that out of these crappy situations, we always find these new lights revealed.
Yeah, and just so everybody understands the context, we are still in the middle of the war. We're almost a year into the war, 300 and something days to the war. It's going on. The front, the North Front has opened up. We just had an errant cruise missile. Well, it wasn't errant, but it never reached its target. But we had I was 6:30 today a.m. I'm watering the plants outside. I'm hearing this faint sirens in the distance. It wasn't here in Petah Tikva, but it was all of Tel Aviv. My parents woke up to. I was like, really? We're doing this again? And so it's kind of surreal to be here, and yet there are people who uproot their lives and move here. And actually, I think they are the smart, interesting people who do it. But hint said. But no, but I'm there's a good you can do good wherever you are. But I think it's a very interesting place to be in right now. Israel, you really feel the extra attention from nature or the upper force, whatever you want to call it, and I think people are feeling this awakening as well. So it's a really interesting time to be here, and we have, as is our custom, we like to bring people here who have an interesting point of view on the question of Jewish anti-Semitism. Why is that a thing? How can we solve it? Who can help us do it? Is there a method to this madness, or are we doomed to just live on with this, curse of sorts? And I'll just say one thing before I introduce our guest. It was very interesting because in the talk that I've had just yesterday, it was interesting. He was an Israeli guy, very well read, and he's a podcaster as well, and he had a lot of guests on his show, and he talked to many people on all sides of the map, and people talking to him about some religious people, some secular liberals, all kinds. And yet when you talk to him, he's not convinced that Jews are at the center of the world. He's not convinced that we play a special role necessarily. He thinks this whole thing was blown out of proportion, that we're missing the point, that we're just we should just keep quiet, lower our heads somehow, if we can do it, just live somewhere nicer. Like a bit, I don't want to say naive, because he's definitely not naive, but he has this thinking that it's just like one big misunderstanding, is the feeling that I got. But I don't think this is the feeling everyone shares necessarily. And it's interesting. We have today a guest who is, he's the director of education at Israel 365. He moved to Israel. He made Aliyah. He came up to Israel, as we say in Hebrew, in 2021, around the same time that I came back to Israel. He's originally from New Jersey, from Livingston, and I think he was an attorney, and then after that he's an ordained rabbi from Yeshiva University, and right now he's in Israel working with our friends among the Christians. We want to hear about that from him. And he also just published a book called The War Against the Bible, which I hope you will tell us a little bit about as well. And he has some very interesting irreverent, or as we call it, rabbinical ideas about some of the things that we all know. Let's give a warm welcome to Rabbi Elie Mischel from Efrat in Israel.
Hey, Rabbi Elie.
Hey, oh, look at that. He changed rooms in the process.
Thanks so much for having me on, guys. It's great to be with you.
It's great to have you. I want to start by asking you again, but people probably are interested. Why did you come to Israel? It seems like you had a nice life. You're a rabbi, up and coming rabbi in New Jersey. Sounds like the best place to be. It's like the Silicon Valley of rabbis. Why come to Israel?
So you're absolutely right.
In the middle of
to ask
COVID.
that question. You're right to ask that question. We had a very good life in New Jersey. I was the rabbi of a synagogue. It was a full-time job. I lived around the corner from the synagogue, no commute. My kids were happy at school. My wife is a psychologist, and she had a great thing going. So in many ways, it doesn't make sense. But on the other hand, for a Jew to be in New Jersey doesn't make sense, right? Like when you step back and look at the bigger picture, we've come now to the place where we belong. And the fact is, Judaism is not just about us as individuals and living a meaningful individual life, and maybe keeping Shabbat and living for beautiful individual purpose, but we're a nation. We're a people, and that's our nationhood is in the land of Israel. That's where the action is. And I really frankly just felt like I was on the edge of the Jewish world for too long. I felt FOMO. I was missing out. And I'll tell you what actually pushed me over the edge. When we made the decision that we had to go. This was a few years before we left. Actually, we heard the terrible news that Ari Fold. I don't know if you know that name, but Ari Fold. He lived in Efrat, and he was an amazing American guy who made Aliyah and served in the army. And how he was stabbed and he was killed outside of the local supermarket here. And even as he was dying, he chased the terrorists and shot him and wounded him. He died a hero. But what you probably don't know is that my wife is a different Fold, and her brother is also Ari Fold,
wow.
who lived across the street from this Ari Fold who was killed at the moment that happened, and they were close friends. So when Ari Fold was murdered by this teenage Arab terrorist, my in-laws, my wife and I, we got so many phone calls from people thinking that my brother-in-law was murdered. And so even to this day, we live in the same neighborhood. I live a few blocks away from the Fold family, where Ari's widow. We always have to say, my brother-in-law, Ari Fold, the plumber, different guy. But something snapped when that happened, when that situation, when that terrible story went down. We just broke down weeping, and we felt connected in a way that we never had before. And it was at that moment we said, we can't be here. And we had a beautiful life in New Jersey, but I know it seems strange to say FOMO for terrorism, right? That I wanted to be here because of terrorism, but I think the better way to say it is that, when our people are celebrating or when our people are hurting, we wanted to be a part of it. And so we live here now, a few blocks away from Ari's widow and his orphans, his children. And it's not always easy, but really an honor to be able to be here among these incredible heroes.
And this is, an inspiring story. It's like I see this as a recurring theme with some of our guests, where this adversity actually brings up, like, instead of packing and going the other way, they're like, no, we're going to go deeper in. And it's an interesting quality. I wonder, have you personally dealt with anti-Jewish sentiment before moving to Israel, to where you are right now? Is this something that was part of your life, or never?
So, overall, I think big picture, my generation had it easy. It's almost like we had a break from history. If you talk to my dad, who's now, retired, but the kind of
grew up like in the late 70s, early 80s kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, my dad's generation, my parents' generation, they saw tremendous anti-Semitism, their houses getting egged on Halloween. My grandfather was beaten up by an anti-Semitic gang literally in his front yard. My dad got docked pay for leaving his Wall Street job early by an hour to get home on Friday afternoon in time for Shabbat. Like they're the kind of things that, it wasn't that long ago. It was my father's generation. And I was born into a time where, communism was collapsing, right? I was there in 1987 as a kid in Washington, D.C. when, let my people go and the Soviet Union collapsed, and like everything seemed to be sunny and good and happy. And I really saw very little growing up, other than the occasional drive-by, anti-Semites screaming, something anti-Semitic on Shabbat as we're walking to the synagogue. But that hardly, it hardly counts. I didn't really experience anything very heavy. But then, obviously coming here to Israel, as we talked about before, I live around the corner from several people who've lost loved ones to terror over the last couple of years, and it's now we live with it all the time. But somehow I would never trade it for a quiet New Jersey life, right? Maybe just because of where I came from. This is what I was yearning for.
You hear that, Seth? Sorry. I don't know what happened to him. No, because deep down he wants to move. I know. I want to ask a question. I don't think we've asked our guests this, but do you feel like, because again, I'm seeing this, split in opinions, but do you feel like anti-Semitism in the diaspora, well, outside of Israel, is of the same root as terrorism, or do you see those as two separate issues? Like, this is the problem of Jews in Israel with whatever's going on for them, and there's anti-Semitism, and one does not relate to the, or in your mind it's one thing?
I think it's all one. I may have had growing up a short little break from history, is what it felt like, but it's right. That break is over, and the anti-Semitism is everywhere, and it's inexplicable, right? To the superficially, no matter where you are, whether you're in Israel or around the world, and God, I think, is clearly reminding us, all of us, who we are, what we are. This year, along with all the horrific anti-Semitism, is a year of unbelievable Jewish identity, the awakening that's happening. This is the real woke.
Who are we? When he's reminding us who we are, like, you can cut through all of the superficial stuff and just go to we speak your language, so you don't need the niceties on top, or you don't have to prep us or prime us for the answer. Just go right to the heart of it.
Sure. Look, as Jews, God set us apart to be I'd like to say, the officer corps of humanity, right? He set us aside with a very, very clear and important mission, which is to teach humanity about God. Now, that's something that has to happen. Without us, the world ultimately collapses upon itself, right? It's amazing. When has there ever been like a truly successful human civilization that lasts, in an ongoing way and doesn't ultimately collapse upon itself? It never happens, right? Because humanity was built with this tremendous need for God and for meaning and for truth. And the people of Israel, the Jewish people, were set aside to bring that to the world. So without us, it collapses, it falls apart. Now, you would think that they'd be throwing parades for us because we're saving them by teaching them about what life is all about, giving them meaning and happiness and joy, right? It's always amazing how Israel, despite the fact that we're constantly running into bomb shelters and having our neighbors killed by terrorists, is one of the happiest countries on earth, right? It's an unbelievable thing because we have it, right? We've got something here that God gave us to share with the rest of the world. But unfortunately, instead of celebrating us, so many of the people throughout the world, right, they resent us for it. And that's the difficulty. It's like a teacher teaching children, right? The teacher could be teaching the most important things that are going to help this child for the rest of their lives. It's so foundational, so important. But the kid is feeling this is just obligation. What are you asking of me? Pressuring me, putting this all on me. And so they resent us for it, because ultimately the Bible, which is, God's word to us, which we're meant to share with the rest of the world, it means restraint, right? There are things you can't do, right? Ultimately, it's a path to happiness and to meaning. But by bringing the Bible to the world, we've caused tremendous resentment and anger. And so it's not surprising, right, that everywhere they're attacking us, whether here or across the world. I think what was surprising was that I had a nice, quiet childhood. That was surprising, but this is the rule.
Let's take out the like you can't turn on the lights and you can't eat bacon stuff. When you say like it limits stuff, like let's leave all the kind of more external stuff aside. What is when you say it limits people? Like that's why everyone hates us because we're limiting them, because God told us that we need to limit ourselves, and leave all the bacon and turning the lights off.
Leave the bacon bits.
Well, no, I'm not. Look, I think the answer is precisely that. They believe that what we're teaching them is just no bacon and no lights and no this and no that, right? They think that what we're teaching them is constant restriction, and that's all. They don't see the deeper, the depth and the joy that comes from a life that's connected to God, right? Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook, he was very, he spoke about this and wrote about this, that this tremendous misunderstanding is the cause of all of this hatred, that they don't fully grasp what it is that we are trying to give over, and maybe we don't always fully grasp what we're trying to give over, and that's part of the problem, right? If we, the officer corps of humanity, don't really get what it's all about, well, then how can we give it over properly, right? That's another. Do we
get what it's about?
So it's hard to say black and white, right? We're a complicated nation. Even if we're small, there's still 15 million of us, and maybe some of us get it more than others. But no, clearly we don't all get it, and that's also part of this process of self-discovery that is happening, and which has been being fast-forwarded now ever since October 7th, because of the anti-Semitism is forcing so many Jews all over the world to awaken to what it is that we're here for. And to begin to see Judaism as more than just a set of rules of no bacon, right, and no turning on the lights on Shabbat, right? If that's what we think Judaism is, then we give that over and we tell the world that that's what it's about, right? Then certainly they're going to hate us. Right? We ourselves need to discover what the Torah, what Judaism is really all about.
I wonder, before you elaborate on that, just as in parentheses, do you feel it's the hate is strictly for giving them this Torah, this this, like we've had a guest on the show, Professor David Patterson. I don't know if you've heard his name, and he said, fascinating guy who converted to Judaism, by the way, who grew up in the South, right? Like, and found something like inexplicable. And he said that the Jew doesn't let the Gentile sleep. Basically, they just want to sleep and just whatever. And the Jews like, no, you have to be aware of this other person over there. And that's what people hate. So the question is, do you think it's only because of this idea that we brought something that they hate, or maybe that we're not bringing something that we
I
should
think
bring?
these are great points. First of all, even when we don't give anything over, simply, our very existence, our presence, is that reminder to these people. It's actually incredible, no matter where we are, even if we just keep to ourselves. I mean, think about it. So many of the Jews of Eastern Europe, they were just staying in their shtetl, but it didn't matter. They hated them that way. And the Reform or secular Jew who maybe is hiding their Jewishness doesn't matter. The very fact that they exist, that they're there, um, some upsets and angers these people in such an unnatural way.
Yeah.
And
Or maybe it is something natural.
or
It would
something
be
very
something we should talk about, part of the
Right.
plan.
Right, right, exactly. So there's that element, but there's also, and this is unquestionable throughout the Bible, God is very clear that he uses this anti-Semitism as a way of waking us up.
Talk
And
about that. Can you
and
give us
how,
some examples?
and that's another reason that we go through this. I mean, this is foundational, right? We are told when we come into the land that if we follow God, it's going to be great. But if we don't, if we stray, what's he going to do? He's going to send enemies against us, right? Now, does God just punish us because he's a sadist, right? And he's angry at us? No, right? God is a parent. And so sometimes a parent does painful things, but always out of love, always because he wants us to become better, to improve, to draw closer. So that's how we can understand the entire book of Judges, right? Is precisely that story. The people of Israel stray. God sends an enemy to persecute us and to inflict pain, and we awaken. We cry out for God's help. Right? God sends a savior, someone to come and to lead us out of that painful situation, right? And then we're blessed with some peace and quiet. But then we have some peace and quiet, and then we forget who we are, and we start the cycle all over again. And that story it starts in the book of Judges, but it's repeated all throughout the rest of the Bible. And even in the 5 books itself, the book of Deuteronomy that we're reading right now, God says all of this is going to happen. He uses
and we
pain
read it
and
we read it every year, and we all read it over and over, but
And
it
yet,
seems like it's not sinking in, because it's like Leah said, before we started, when we were just explaining ourselves, that we use big data and history and all the sources, and it's there, whether you're reading in the historical sources of the sages, or you're looking at every empire that ever happened, and where the Jews were along with those empires. So it seems like it's an issue of education, but
frankly, it seems every time that this happens, like it's as if it's never happened before, right? American Jewry right now isn't, the shock of this year. The shock of this year. I mean, if you've ever read the Bible, what did you think? I mean, this is how it always goes, right? But somehow American Jews had this presumption, right? Some might call it arrogance, to think that America would be different.
Arrogance, American Jews? No. Shocker.
That somehow American Jews would be spared, right? That American Jews would be different. And of course that's not the case. But it's really incredible. I mean, this cycle, as you said, it's a historical cycle. It's happened over and over again.
The problem that I feel is something emotional, and because when you don't, we could see it clearly. I read a book by this guy Ray Dalio. He talks about the changing world order. He runs like one of the biggest hedge funds in the world, and I think I've talked about it here before, because what's so fascinating about it is he had a come to Jesus moment. Literally, one of his kids died, and he said, I guess he went through this thing of, I need to pass on everything I learned. It wasn't enough just to do his own thing, and he turned everything into he became more of like a human being. And he said, I need to make money for my clients, regardless of whether we're in war, whether in times of peace, whether things are going up, whether things are going down. So he studied. Well, he had a team of people, all of his, like in these big banks, your dad was on Wall Street, you probably know they have tons of people studying history and trends and everything to understand what's going to happen in the world. And it turns out that you can chart exactly how every empire goes up in kind of 4 phases and
Yeah,
comes back down.
we did an episode on it, Seth. Why are you selling Ray Dalio? You should sell our podcast.
Okay, Ray's a little more well known, but you
For
can.
now.
But what happens, and it's not unique to him. It's a phenomenon in psychology as well, and also Leo, the fourth turning, right? This whole
Yeah,
thing
Strauss-Howe
is
theory. Yep.
that when you're the generation that comes after a war, you have a certain kind of feeling about life. But when you're the next generation who never experienced war in your life, you don't have any. So there's like the 70-year cycle called the small cycle, and then there's a bigger cycle, right? So each of us, the problem is we only get to experience one of each part of the cycle in our lifetime. We don't get to. So if we're like people like us, we internalize the whole thing because we've been studying the texts and we feel it and we see it with our eyes and we see where we are. The reason why I say it's emotional is because it doesn't matter even if you read it, right? Because all the Jews who are going to synagogue, and even, I don't know how many there are, say there's 15 million Jews. I don't know, it's 3 million who are reading the Bible every day. I don't know how many it is. Like, it's not enough to just read it unless these things emotionally impact you so that you feel you're inside the story and you feel that what you're reading is your life. And it seems like where the problem is. Like, how does this emotionally impact us? Not on the surface. Nothing should be a surprise that's happening.
So I fully agree. I think you're touching on an incredibly, incredibly important point. We can read the Bible, but does the Bible enter us? That's the question. And I'll be honest, I don't think that for my first 40 years of life, right? I was 40 years old when I made Aliyah and came to Israel. I don't think that for my first 40 years that I ever really was able to connect the Bible to my life in a natural and complete way. There's something about living here, and I've made a very special effort in terms of the way I study the Bible now. I have a class that I give every week, and with this group of people for the last few years, we've really been working through precisely this point. Right? We will not, go through a chapter of the Bible without stopping at several points, and we go slowly. We stop at several points in each class and say, what is the meaning of this for our time that we are living through right now? You see, I don't believe that the Bible is history. I believe the Bible is a blueprint. Of course, it is history. Yes, it is. These things did happen. David walked the earth. Solomon walked the earth. The first temple was real. These things all happened, but I don't believe that we were given these books to read them as history. I believe that we were given them to read them as a blueprint. And I'll give you a great example, which I think is very powerful.
Give us, but it's like everyone should see himself as coming out of Egypt, right? Like this I should relive those things, right?
Exactly. But I'll give you a framework that will make it even more contemporary for us at this particular moment in time.
Give it to us.
There's a person you should probably he doesn't speak English, but you have to talk to him at some point. His name is Pinchas Polansky from the Soviet Union, and he became connected to the Bible underground. Just an incredible person. He lives in Jerusalem. He's not well known, but he's an absolutely brilliant scholar. So he explains as follows, and I think that this is just brilliant. He says that the 3 stages of redemption are represented by the first 3 kings of the people of Israel: Saul, David, and Solomon. Saul was sort of like the secular Zionism of our time. He may have been personally religious, but he was not somebody who brought God into his kingdom, right? Saul united the nation. He formed a modern army. He defended his people against enemies, right? That's sort of like the first stage of the Jewish people coming back to the land of Israel in modern times. We've come back and we had that secular Zionist stage, but that's not enough, right? And we see, that the secular Zionist Jewish world here in Israel, it's kind of collapsing upon itself. It didn't have enough meaning. Secular Zionism, it just wasn't enough, right? It's basically run out of fuel. They accomplished unbelievable things, but it ended. The second stage is the stage of David. And David brings this religious revival to the nation of Israel, this Jewish identity. You've probably heard about Israelis versus Jews, right? If we've been through, Saul was the era of the Israelis, but now we're entering a new era, the era of the Jews. It's extremely difficult for the left-wing secular parties in Israel to make a government anymore. They made one for under a year and it collapsed,
You,
right?
you can say freely that there is no left in Israel. There's a
Right,
small
and
minority of
that was
people who
before
resist.
October 7th, right? That was
Yeah.
before October 7th. Look, Israel is fundamentally changing. It's becoming more Jewish all the time. And obviously the Sephardic community is at the foundation of that, but the growth of all the religious communities in Israel, it's shifting, and I've seen this in among my own cousins who, 30 years ago, they were anti-religious, secular, and now they married Sephardi girls and they make, and they do Friday night Shabbat dinners. Things are changing here.
I just saw this article that there's like 10,000 people who are newly coming closer to the Torah, and in 168 seminaries around the country, out of which 42 opened just in the last year. So a quarter of those just opened. And kids are signing up to the religious schools and yeshivas, and there's this awakening, right? As you said,
it's an incredible awakening. In the army, they all want to wear tzitzit, right? It's unbelievable, right? Even the word secular doesn't really work anymore. So we right now are at the beginning of this new era, the era of David, right? Which is the next step in the redemptive process for the people of Israel. And everything that you read about in the book of Samuel, right, which tells us in depth about the shift from Saul to David and how hard that was, and the jealousy that Saul had for David, and how hard it was for him to ultimately become king. We are reliving all of that now. If you just replace Saul and David with the old, left-wing secular guard, right? And David is sort of the new rising, more religious, connected to God kind of. All of a sudden, the book of Samuel comes alive as a blueprint. It's about how to shift from one era to another. We don't want to have civil war in this country, right? We don't want that to happen. And so how David, doesn't want to fight back, but also has to defend his interests. Ultimately, our final goal is the third king of Israel, who is Solomon, right? Solomon is we always say, the Messiah, the son of David, Mashiach ben David.
Ben David.
So the goal is not David, because David is the man of war. Our generation, we are the generation of David. The goal is Solomon, who builds the temple. He's the king of peace. He never has to fight one battle in his life. And God willing, maybe it'll be our children, our grandchildren, who will be that era of Solomon. And what will happen spiritually at his time? Well, Solomon builds the temple and invites all of the nations of the world to come pray together in the temple. My house is a house of prayer for all the nations. And that ultimately, so after the people of Israel, discover ourselves now during the era of David, we'll be ready to share with the entire world in the era of Solomon. So that's still in the future. But we have to know where it is.
Are we talking like 2025, 2026? You thinking can you give us?
But hold on. So is this why you're doing the work in with Israel 365 with the Christians? Are they already collecting donations for the third temple? What's the story? Can you give us the scoop on that?
I don't think anyone else is doing what we're doing, and yeah, and that's exactly it. Nobody can comprehend what we're talking about. Who would even say that anti-Semites have anything valuable to say without saying we're anti-Semitic or we're self-hating Jews? But there's something that everybody's missing in this whole picture. And the reason why the solution is so close is because we're not waiting for anyone else to change. We're not waiting for the laws to be enacted. We're not waiting for a new politician to get elected. The answer is way closer than everybody thinks.
Like us, hit the bell thing on the YouTube so you can get a notification when the new episode is up. Well, this is the Jew Function, and let's get back to our guest.
The work that I do at Israel 365 is really I would call it like a vanguard. We're sort of like at the beginning, we're really ahead of our time. It's really the work of Solomon. But we also, the sages are very clear, and it's even clear actually in the Bible itself. Isaiah says this, that the final redemption will not come quickly. It will be the opposite of how we left Egypt. It will come slowly, step by step, over time. David, from the point that he's anointed to the point that he actually becomes king over Israel, is many, many years, right? We have to be patient. This is a human process. And so what we're seeing right now is not just the people of Israel slowly discovering themselves. We are also seeing, it's still a minority, but there's a movement out there in the world, among the nations of the world. We don't think about them enough, but we focus on all the anti-Semites all the time. That's what this is, and understandably so. They're all trying to kill us right now, but there are a lot of good people out there. And what's unbelievable, and I can talk in depth about this. I spent 3 weeks traveling America this summer, from community to community across the nation, meeting unbelievable people these are Christians who are discovering that, wait a second, we're not following the Bible. And they're turning to the Jewish people. There are some millions of Christians, still a minority, right? There's over 2 billion Christians in the world. But there are some, we don't know exactly how many, but there are some millions of Christians that are out there that are turning to us and asking us to guide them. And it doesn't happen all at once. You know, then I'm not saying they're all going to become Jews. I don't believe that that's the case.
Where do you, is there a like a certain denomination or a certain?
So it's fascinating. I'll tell you, I stayed with people and I met them in, you know, a family in Spokane, Washington, in Fort Worth, Texas, in Lubbock, Texas, in West Texas, all these different places. I met people who are not part of any denomination. They're all very serious religious people. They are very, very committed, but they all came on their own to the same conclusions, right? They're still Christians. They're not Jewish, but they all realize
a certain kind of church or a certain kind of Methodist.
No, this
Baptist.
is outside of the churches. It's outside of the churches. And in fact, that's the whole way that Christianity is going right now. We can talk more about that as well. The whole brick and mortar church is not doing well, but doesn't mean that people are not searching for God. But all of these people on their own, none of them know each other. They've all come to the conclusion, wait a second, why are we celebrating Christmas and Easter, which are not in the Bible? And we're not celebrating the festivals that are actually in the Bible. And they're doing this without any guidance, right? They're not keeping the festivals the way that we would. They're not, you know, like they none of them are eating what they call unclean meats. They're trying to keep kosher, but it's not what we would call kosher, but it's biblical.
Kosher style.
Right, but it's actually kosher style. I would call this biblical Christianity, which is really, really fascinating. And all of them, and these are all serious people, because to come to this conclusion on your own, meaning you have to be like a serious thinker. So this one's an entrepreneur, or this one's a very successful psychologist. These are not, low-level people. These are real thinkers.
I just saw
them on their own.
The thing with Patricia Heaton, right? She's like an ambassador of Yad Vashem. Have you know her, the actress from Everybody Loves Raymond?
Sure.
She's the wife.
The October 7th project. Yeah, she's really been amazing.
She became like a whole, an ambassador and outspoken and doing exactly that. So what are they? I mean, people ask her, "Oh, you just like an evangelical Christian? You just want to see the Armageddon and the death of the Jews?" It's like, no, it's not about that. So can you say, what is their motivation, and B, how do you see that and the work you do with this population impacting anti-Semitism or Jewish role in the world against, tie it all together.
Sure.
You get in a nice little package.
It's a funny thing. Dennis Prager, likes to point out, and he's one of the traditional Jews today who's most involved with Christians, right?
Yeah.
And and so we have a lot to do with him in our work. But Dennis likes to say, Jews, they're
because of his because of his online learning.
Yeah, he's constantly speaking at churches and working with Christians, and he's very, very, very involved with the Christian.
He's been very outspoken, doing like this.
Yeah, I don't know. He actually broke down in tears when he met us at Israel 365. He said that when I die, my work will continue. He was like emotional. But it's interesting. Dennis likes to point out, the Jews, we're so confident, like we know everything, right? So we know the only reason these Christians want to help us is because they want us to all go to Israel so we can die in the Armageddon, right? So we Jews are so certain about that. He goes, how many of you Jews who are so certain can even name 3 of the Gospels? Meaning you know so little about Christianity, yet you've already decided that all of these people, they're only in it for themselves and they don't really care about us and they just want us to die, right? And so on and so forth. The reality is there's over 2 billion Christians in the world. And if we Jews are complicated, think about them. They've got like 100,000 denominations. Right. So to talk about the Christians is actually ridiculous, right? There are many different kinds of Christians, and there are many, and they're motivated by different factors. You're right. There are some Christians out there who want us to go back to Israel because they want Armageddon to come. That is nowhere near the majority. Certainly, I never meet people like that. And I meet a lot of Christians. I talk to people all the time, whether pastors or just simple people living out there, in some small town in America. On a very basic level, God says to Abraham at the very beginning, chapter 12 in Genesis, very clear, I will bless those who bless you. Now, that could be a very selfish thing, right? I'll give money to Israel so that God blesses me. But more fundamentally, what that means is God blesses our people. And if God loves the people of Israel, well, then I'm obligated to also. right? That's the most fundamental thing. It's not necessarily more complicated than that for many, many Christians. It's very simple. They read the Bible, they take the Bible seriously, and God says
do we have
that you be blessed.
Do we have other friends
Besides Christians? So that's another. I got to first. Let me first try to answer this question. But the point is that there are many different motivations and many levels. There are Christians that I've met who are truly some of the righteous people on earth, right? And that might be a small percentage in terms of how they understand the Jewish sensitivities, and that they've now some of them have rejected proselytizing. They don't want to convert us anymore because they know that we're God's chosen people. So there's been a massive shift that has occurred in world history that does not get enough attention. Ever since the establishment of the state of Israel, so much of the Christian world was thrown into a theological crisis. What they were taught, right, and not from the New Testament, right? The New Testament is largely not anti-Semitic because the New Testament was basically written by Jews. Right. So the anti-Semitism came in the generations after the New Testament was written, and it was introduced early on. John Chrysostom and a lot of other church fathers, in around the year 100 and go CE and going on and after that. But none of that's actually in their New Testament. And so this theological, crisis that they've had, because they were told by all these church fathers and these anti-Semites like Martin Luther and others that the Jews are never going back to Israel. God has cursed them. God has rejected them. And when we came back to the land and the state of Israel was established, it wasn't just a joyous time for us. It literally threw much of Christendom into complete theological disarray. The Catholic Church eventually completely redid its theology in order to make sense of what happened, right? And so much has shifted in the Christian world. So that's just something for Jews to become more aware of, to understand that, that the state of Israel is not just important for us, right? It had a massive impact on the world. And this gets overshadowed by anti-Semitism, certainly by the Muslims, by so many Muslims in Arab nations, and certainly now around the world. But we shouldn't lose sight of that. Right. And there's been progress that's happening step by step by step that should give us a lot of strength and encouragement. There are a lot of good people still out there, and not just in America. Right. If you go to Brazil, from one mega church to the next, you'll find the Brazilian flag and the Israeli flag. Right. It's unbelievable. Right. And we've hardly even touched those nations. Right. Most of those people have never even met a Jew, and yet they love Israel and the Jewish people. Right. Sure. The number one growing branch or denomination of Christianity today is called Pentecostalism. It's like a very charismatic form of Christianity. And that is the number one growing brand of Christianity in Africa and Asia. They have like 30,000 new people a day. So, in this denomination, it's unbelievable.
And what's their main thing? Just so
they happen to be the most pro-Zionist, pro-Israel group of Christians in the world. And that's the one that's growing around the world.
And that's because they believe that Jews are God's people, chosen people, and their own existence is dependent upon the existence of the Jews in a way, right?
Exactly. And a lot of the teachings, that have kind of held people back in the past, the theology, right? They're less theological. They believe that they can even have prophecy today. Pastor Hagee, right? The famous Pastor Hagee is a Pentecostal, right? And Pastor Paula White, who's Trump's pastor, who ran the National Faith Advisory Board in the White House, right? She's incredibly important, right? She came and toured Israel with us and studied Torah with Orthodox Jewish women. She's real, and these people are less focused on the past and theology, and they sense and feel in their heart that we are their brothers. So I'm mentioning all of this not to in any way lessen,
I'm going to Christianity, Seth. I'm going to Christianity. I'm done with this Jewish.
I was thinking different. That wasn't my strategy, but I'm all of a sudden very hopeful. I'm not worried about the problems. It seems like the good is overshadowing the bad.
But that's what it seems like. To get to your question about others outside of Christianity, that really comes to the book that I wrote. And I was running around America doing book launches this summer. The reason why we're finding, I believe, this friendship
is this which book? Is this The War Against the Bible?
This is The War Against the Bible.
Show it.
Right? The reason why, right? The War Against the Bible, which is Ishmael, Esau, and Israel at the end times. The reason why we're finding this love among Christians in particular, and not outside of Christianity, is because we share something in common with Christianity. which is the Bible, right? Yes, Muslims believe in God. They do.
And the
And we view
prophets and
them
the
that way.
forefathers, yeah. But
They believe in God, and we do not traditionally view Muslims as idolaters. We don't. We consider them far more advanced. And in fact, that from a Jewish perspective, Islam, their theology is a lot closer to ours in many ways than
sure.
Christian theology. But here's the fundamental problem, is that they do not believe in the Bible. They take stories from the Bible, but they reject the Bible overall. And without the Bible, right, we're heading on an absolute collision course. Whereas with Christianity, we share something fundamental, right? We all believe that God gave the Bible to Moses at Mount Sinai, right? That means that they share a reverence for the Bible. And so Maimonides, who was not, very pro-Christian overall, but he was very clear. You're allowed to study the Bible as a Jew with Christians, but you're not allowed to study the Bible with Muslims. And the reason is because he goes, with Christians, that they revere it. They're going to take it seriously. And maybe, they'll come to learn something from you, and something good will come out of that. Not that we're trying to make them Jews. We're not. That's not our goal. But the point is that we have something shared, and a shared reverence there. Whereas with Muslims, they'll use it against us. They don't believe in it. They take what they want, right? They hate the fact that it was Isaac who was chosen and not Ishmael, right? And all of these problems that they have with the Bible. Without the Bible, they actually, I think, become even more dangerous than they are, had they not, if they didn't believe in God at all. See, why is Islam so dangerous? They believe in God, but without the Bible. They have the passion of belief in God, but the Bible is God's will. The Bible tells us what God wants us to do. Now, if you believe in God, but you don't accept his Bible where he tells us what to do, right, taken to an extreme, I'm not saying that all Muslims
it's like
are
the cloven hoof, but it doesn't chew his cud.
Right. So what you end up having is October 7th, right? Because then they can tell themselves that slaughtering Jewish women and babies is God's will, right? That's much harder for a Christian to tell themselves, right? Because if they accept the Bible and the laws of the Bible and the 10 Commandments and so on and so forth, it's very,
hold
very
on. Now
difficult.
I've been cruising with you this whole time, but there's plenty of justification for killing Jews because of Jesus. The Christians had no problem throughout history.
Not only that, Seth, I'll remind you that we've had a few Christian guests. I mean, anti-Jewish Christian guests here, and one of the main gripes is like some of the stuff that's written in the Talmud against Christians, right? So it's as you said, a lot of gray areas.
Look, there's a big discussion to be had here about the history, but the truth is Christianity taught, right, even at its worst, it taught, right, this what we believe obviously is very flawed and broken theology, but they said that we were rejected by God, but they expressly forbade the killing of Jews. All the murders that happened, right, was against what the Pope had said to do, right? And that's why you'll find today also this near universal acknowledgement by Christians that they violated their own laws, right? They have a lot of internal. There are many books that are written, which I can tell you about, where they are like struggling with their evil past and how they did not live up to the standard that the Bible set. In the end of the day, Christians did some very bad things because people are capable of some very, very bad things.
So Ellie,
but they can't justify it in the way that a Muslim can say that this is God's will.
Well, you can also say, I'm sorry, just to finish that thought, you can also say that I think Rabbi D, who said it, like, look, there's an evolution, and Jews went through their holy wars and then settled down, and then Christians went through their crusades and then settled down and even made peace with the Jews, and now the Muslims are going through their jihad. It's just on a bigger scale, but if we survive that, then we'll all be friends. So,
well, look, my thesis is that without the Bible, right, we have some significant problems, and what we're seeing today, I believe, is what was prophesied in the book of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, it talks about Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia, had a dream. And Daniel came and explained the dream, that his dream was referring to 4 different major persecutions. 4 great empires will persecute the people of Israel in history, and afterwards God will come and redeem his people. And it says there that the first one is Babylonia itself, right, which destroyed the first temple, and all Jewish thinkers agree that the second and third are the first. It's number 2 is Persia, right, the story of Purim and Esther, And the third one are the Greeks, the story of Hanukkah. But what is that great, the fourth and the worst of all, that fourth terrible kingdom that's going to come against the people of Israel before the end of time? So my understanding, I follow that of Rabbi Sadia Gaon, one of the great Jewish thinkers from many, many generations ago, who in his interpretation there, it's very clear that this fourth kingdom is made up of two parts that are together in an unstable alliance. And who are those two nations that come together in an unstable alliance against Israel? It is Ishmael and Esau. Okay?
Right.
And Ishmael and Esau, and this is what I do in the book, really get into who they were. Ishmael is so dangerous because he believes in God, but rejects the Bible, right? That's why Ishmael and Islam, when taken to a radical extreme, is so dangerous. But who's Esau today? Right? Esau, according to the rabbis, we understand Esau as somebody who rejected God altogether, rejected God. And so the rabbis therefore compared early Rome, the Rome that destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, which was a pagan Rome, right? The King Titus is said to have announced, right, after he destroyed the temple, that I killed the God of Israel. Now I'm God, right? Right. This idea that we reject God altogether and make ourselves into gods, right? That was what Rome was. And so, who is Rome today? Who is Esau today? I believe that is the anti-God secular left. And what's amazing is that Ishmael and Esau, jihadists and the secular left,
The
have come together in an unstable alliance against the people of Israel. And what they share—
Is this covered in your book?
This is the thesis of the book. What they share in common is their hatred of the Bible. This crazy alliance between jihadists, and
So Ellie, hold on a sec.
Columbia.
Is there something that what'd you say to Columbia?
I'm saying, left-wing progressives at Columbia University, together with
that's
jihadists.
what we're talking about. Davidai, I think is his name. We spoke to him here before he became huge there. But so let me add, as you're saying this, and now you just talk about this, the jihadists and this left-wing thing, the crazy kind of piece in that, as we're like talking about it and opening it up, is there's so many freaking Jews in the left, like in that left that you're talking about, in that unstable alliance. Like everywhere you look there's another Jew.
Jew function is really it's a desperate attempt to change something about the rise in anti-Semitism that doesn't seem to go away, and looking at history usually ends with something terrible before we reach relative quiet again. But we don't want to reach something terrible. We want to do it now. So that's why we're doing this podcast. And if you like this, also consider leaving a small contribution on our Patreon channel. Right. We both have day jobs, by the way, so we're not hoping to make money from this. We're hoping to see some change of heart.
Any funds are used to get this out there, to get this to people. We consider this the same way you go out every day to get money to feed your family, put a roof over your head. This is also critically important to our future, to our safety, to a good world, not only for Jews, but for everyone.
Well, this is the Jew function, and let's get back to our guest.
The fact that there are Jews who work against the Jewish people should not be surprising. It's upsetting, but it should not be surprising. We've had that from the start. We've had Jews who side with our enemies. That goes all the way back, through every oppression that we've lived through. So, I'm not particularly troubled by that. I mean, it's upsetting, but I'm not. That's the beauty of studying the Bible, right? This whole book started as self-therapy, right? After October 7th, I frankly couldn't bring myself to study the Talmud. I couldn't bring myself to study many of the things that I normally do. I needed to understand what it is that we were dealing with here. And so I just studied. I got up early every morning for hours, sat there with my coffee, and I read things in the Bible that literally made me jump out of my chair. Because when you study the Bible this way, and my eyes were opened to realize that this is not history, or it's not some fantastical future. We tend to look at these prophecies, one day, that doesn't mean me. I'm sorry, we are living through it now, right? I'll give you one example. The book of Zechariah 9, the 9th chapter of Zechariah, talks about an attack from Gaza, an attack from the north, and it talks about how hostages will be held underground. in prisons underground. It's all there in the 9th chapter. It even talks about arrows from Yemen. It even
Does it
talks
say,
about arrows
does it
from
say how we
Yemen.
release the hostages in Zechariah?
Let's pray. We pray. We hope so, right? That God willing, right? But it's unbelievable. Meaning, and the book of Zechariah also, a few chapters later, speaks about how there will be people among the Jews who will work together with our enemies against us. I'll give you another unbelievable example, because for this week, specifically as we're talking.
But lead it to this point, because you're not worried about the Jews who are rising, who are against the Bible. And so I think this is the point you're making now, right?
Yes, we look, we've always been a minority, and there have always been Jews who've worked against us. Right now, first of all, many of these Jews are coming back. What I'm seeing right now, like we've been in touch with. I'll give you an example. Sid Rosenberg, the #1 radio host in New York, right? He's a right-wing Trump guy, WABC. He's amazing. By his own admission, this is a guy who never thought twice about being a Jew. But since October 7th, he's on fire for his people. He came to Jerusalem and did his show from Israel for a week. And we're finding this all over the place. I mean, it's happening everywhere I go. When I went across the country and all across America this summer, I didn't just meet Christians, I met Jews as well. And I'm seeing unbelievable things, right? In Spokane, Washington, the one major synagogue is led by a lesbian rabbi who's divorced and has a trans kid. Okay, it's like hard to even imagine a more emblematic example of what happened to American Jewry. But and that synagogue is not really doing anything for Israel. They're hiding, and it's really shameful. But there have been many people from that synagogue who since October 7th have left, and they go to Chabad now. They're not really Orthodox, right? They're not really into the whole separation of men and women or any of those things. Right. But there's something that happened to them that has awakened inside of them, and they're Jews who are now on fire for their people, and they know that they were in the wrong place. They need to be with the Jews who care. And so I really think that there's this division that's happening now, right? It's no longer about Orthodox or conservative or reform. I think what the division that matters now are Jews who care about their people and Jews who don't and who are falling away. I actually, for years, this was my policy in Livingston as the rabbi of the synagogue there. I said, I don't care what you've done. You can come into my synagogue. You could be, it was an Orthodox synagogue. I don't care if you're gay. I don't care if you're trans. I don't care, if you're a Sabbath violator. I don't care any of those things. Everybody's welcome. Come here. You're a Jew. The only people who are not welcome in my synagogue are Jews who turn against their people. That's a red line. That was a red line. You can't come in here and be against Israel. There's no such thing, being against Israel. You don't have to like the government, but you have to be for your people. And in the end of the day, that is the division that matters. And I think what we're seeing here, because of the war, is that some Jews are like trying really hard, to deny their identity, to deny their heritage. They're like Jews
also
for jihad.
Just to outright go against.
Right, Jews for jihad. It's this desperate yearning to not be, to run away from their destiny and who they are. And on the other hand, so many Jews are coming home. And, we could be depressed or we could be optimistic. Frankly, I prefer to focus on the optimistic side. I'm seeing unbelievable things with Jews that I would never have expected. And there's an incredible awakening that's happening now. And I think it's our responsibility, the three of us here and all of us who consider ourselves in one way or another influencers or leaders, and to whatever degree, to embrace these Jews, help them return to their people. It's not about orthodoxy, right? This is about nationhood. This is about nationhood, and there's some beautiful things that are happening here among the pain, with all the pain. And I think that the Bible, and that really is my focus. I think that the Bible gives us the perspective, right? It lays it out that this is what's going to happen. All of these things that we're talking about, what you're saying that you've pulled from history and so on, you're absolutely correct. But it's all laid out there in the Bible as well. It's like the stamp of approval for all the things that the conclusions that you're coming to. It says it. It says it in our Bible.
So what we see is that each of these texts though says that when we have unity, like that was the condition for receiving the Torah. When we had disunity, that was the condition for the destruction of the temple. So when we're reading, that's kind of makes us a little nervous because I'm almost losing my nervousness talking to you, and I feel like I need my Rabbi Elie dose, like, you know, each day to keep it up.
So I'll
But
tell you, there's a great challenge here with unity, right? I mean, I edited a magazine, right, where I'm constantly editing articles from writers with superficial calls for unity. And I'm like tired of it already. I'm like, yes, we can all write beautiful articles about how we all need to be united. And I agree with that. Of course, we agree with that. But that's not the real challenge here. In the end of the day, some ideas are right and some ideas are wrong, right? As an example, right? Do ultra Orthodox Haredi Jews have an obligation to serve in the Israeli army? Yes or no, right? We can't both be right, right? There's a right and a wrong on this question. I believe that they have an obligation to. I believe they're wrong.
I believe that they are. By the way, I believe they're obligated to serve. Maybe it doesn't have to be in the army. There's so many places to serve.
So we have debates here, right? We've got to figure that out. Now, we can't just say unity and then not deal with the issues. The real challenge is, how do we deal with that issue, right? How do we have that discussion about the ultra-Orthodox Jews with them and do so in a way that doesn't lead to hatred?
But that's hold on. But
that's very hard to do. But we got to.
But that's what we're trying to promote. That's these are our goods here that Seth and I are trying to promote. Is you know, if you want to talk about anything, it means that you have to cover whatever friction exists between you with love and care, like you would in a family. Start treating each other in this way, and then from that have all the discussions. You don't have to agree. You can fight. You can argue, but if you don't cover it with this love, with this care.
So that's the challenge, right? On the one hand, not to fall into hatred and constant argument and feeling hatred for your opponent. And on the other hand, not to have these superficial calls for unity that never actually deal with any of the issues. Because in the end of the day, in the end of the day, I'll give you as my example, right? The secular Zionist, you know, or left-wing progressive view that comes out of a certain percentage of people in, you know, kind of represented by Tel Aviv. I don't think it's a majority at all. It's a small percentage. I think they're absolutely dead wrong, right? And ultimately, I believe that my ideas will defeat their ideas. But as David taught us, and this is why we have to study the Bible, and particularly David's life, right? David was all about victory of ideas and bringing the nation together his way, but without defeating the people, right? What's incredible about David he was unbelievably harsh with our enemies. He was cruel to those who were cruel because he knew that was the only way to defend his people. But when it came internally, right, he was unbelievably flexible, meaning on the one hand, right, he pushed forward his vision and he won. But on the other hand, he forgave people who rebelled against him. He pardoned them. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? Whereas in the old days, everybody would kill the king who came before him and kill his whole family, right? He didn't kill Saul's family. Not only he embraced them and helped them, right, and loved them. So, you know, that's the way forward. We have to be studying David, who is the greatest king of Israel of all time, not just because he's the greatest king, but because we are David. We are literally living that time right now. And it's a painful time. David's life was very tough. And he actually says at the beginning of one of the Psalms, he says, like, God, I'm willing to take all the pain. Just let it be good for my children. Right. And I think that we feel the same way. We're ready to fight. Right. I'm surrounded, you know, and you know this, we're surrounded by heroes here in Israel. 18, 19-year-old kids, I stand up when they walk into the room. The kids are heroes, right? We're surrounded by one hero after another. They're all willing to go to battle and to fight and to do. I mean, it's incredible what's happening here. Right? We're ready to fight. We're ready to make the sacrifices that are necessary so that our children and grandchildren will be like Solomon and build the temple. So, you know, I think you have to be optimistic. You have to be. You have no option otherwise. Jews are obligated to be optimistic. Right? I'll give you a verse from that Zechariah 9, that chapter where it talks about the hostages underground. Right. Listen to this verse. These just a few words, and remember these words. Right? The prophet says, "Shuvu levitzaron, asirei hatikva." Return to your stronghold. Right? Go back to your strength, Jews. You are prisoners of hope. We, the Jewish people, are prisoners of hope. We cannot give up hope. We're prisoners of hope. It's unbelievable, those words. Return to your stronghold. That's our stronghold. The reason why the Jews always win in the end, we never lose, right? Ultimately, we always come back and our enemies fall into the dustbin of history is because we are the Asirei HaTikva. God gave us the promise, right, that we are the prisoners of hope and he will never let us give up hope. And so that's why you look around Israel, we're surrounded by one person is greater than the next. It's just an honor to be in this country, to stand up as everybody walks into the room. I mean, this place is incredible.
Hear that, Seth? You got to come here. This is where it's all. See, that's good salesmanship. That's what we need out there.
Even the fighting is great here, Seth. Like the internal fighting and the yelling at each other, and like the ladies, in the streets of Jerusalem. And I've seen it happen to me, telling you how to take care of your children better. All that stuff, all the intensity. They're so intense. Everybody's so intense here, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's like
fun. I was just in Jerusalem with my family a couple of weeks ago, and we had friends, and they took the bus, like a whole family of them, and they took the bus, and there was like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid sitting there in the bus. And it's like they're like, instinctively, we're like, "Do you need help?" Like, no, I'm okay. Like, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to the Western Wall. I'm fine. It's like,
by himself.
By himself. So it's like, I'm with you. I mean, I think it's a
there's a special energy here, and if you have the wrong attitude towards it, then it can make you want to run away. And I think Prime Minister Rabin's granddaughter, just left Israel, right? She's like, it's too much.
She?
She just left. Yeah, she moved to New
York. What's the name?
I'm not apologizing. She said it's in the news. I don't remember.
What's her name? What's her name? Do you remember her name? I forget her name.
I can't remember her name offhand, but she just moved to New York with her family, and she says, I'm not apologizing, and I understand it, right? If without this biblical perspective and the bigger picture,
you can't.
It's so intense here, and it can be very hard and really, really tough. But if you can have that healthy perspective that God gives us, the perspective of hope, it all ends well in the Bible.
Let me ask you.
I googled her, and there's a picture of her next to Ehud Barak.
What's her? I got to ask you. We're sort of coming to an end here, but I wanted to ask you, like, why do you think? And don't give me the answer of like, well, there's always a small minority that's like that. But I'm asking a sort of a broader question, right? Especially for those who are, let's say, the swing voters, okay, out there. Why do you think people have this, this internal resistance to this idea of God? Because I know we're not
the Jews or the rest of the world.
No. Our people. I'm talking about our people specifically. Our people, and I know we're not talking about God as some sort of a grandfather up in the heaven. I know it's more, it's like a law, and it has a certain direction and wisdom and all those qualities we ascribe to ourselves, but even more than that. But why that resistance to the idea that there even is a force or a purpose? Because I do find a very clear line in the sand. And when you talk to people, either there are those who have an inkling that there is some sort of a purpose. I don't get it. Maybe I don't connect to but there's a purpose and there's a force. There's a something, right? And I'm sort of with it. And there are those who like refuse it, vehemently, like, no, there's me. And so why do you think among our own people is this thing? What can you tell those people?
Go back to the book of Samuel, the 8th chapter, right? Where the people demand a king. They come to Samuel, the prophet, they demand a king. Why? So that we could be like all of the other nations, right? Samuel got all angry at them, not because having a king is anti-Jewish, no, right? King David is wonderful, but their motivation was to be like all the other nations. This desire to not be special, this desire to run away from our mission has been there. But
there's another piece, though. We have to be special, and the purpose of all of those exiles you mentioned is we also have to. All of the sparks need to. The entire world needs to know about God. So we have to like do our thing and spread, and do our thing and spread, and do our thing and spread.
Well, actually, so your point, I think it is expressed beautifully through the prayer Aleinu that we say every day, 3 times a day. It's like one of the most foundational prayers. The first half of the prayer Aleinu, the first paragraph, is about Jewish uniqueness, right? You did not make us like them. We are different, right? We don't bow down to idols. It's all about us. And then the second paragraph it even uses the phrase. That's where the phrase tikkun olam comes from, fixing of the world. It's the most universal prayer. So what's going on there? The answer is that the ultimate goal is bringing God to the whole world. But the way that we do that is by being us, and not by trying to ape and imitate the rest of the world. When we can lean into who we are, into our mission, we can, right, and embrace it. And yes, sometimes it can feel like a great burden because of all the anti-Semitism. And it's also not easy to be Jewish, right? There's a lot of things that are demanded of us. But when you can get beyond that and see the sweetness of it and the joy of living as a Jew, right? And when you can do that, right? And you can really become who you are meant to be, and who we are meant to be as a people, right? Then, only then will we succeed, right, at bringing God to the rest of the world. So that is, that's the order of events. And what's happening right now, right, is David. We the Jewish people. The real drama now is not the anti-Semitism. These people are boring. We know what the UN is going to say, right? Yeah. Bunch of mamzerim bastards, right? That's who they are, right? Yeah. What are we surprised by it anymore? The fact that there's only that the only countries that said that Jews belong in Jerusalem, right? Remember, they came just a few days ago. They said all Jews should leave the old city of Jerusalem, right? The only countries that came out against that were the United States, Argentina, and a bunch of little islands, right? Like the entire world has essentially turned against us. Okay, whatever, what's new? Zionism is racism. They said that 50 years ago. The real drama is what's happening with our own people. And as we figure it out step by step, and it's not easy, we're a stiff-necked people because we're strong, we're strong-minded. It doesn't happen easily. But step by step, as we figure it out, and as you said, right, there's no real hardcore left in Israel anymore. It's a tiny minority. The whole nation is coming to its roots. We're finding our identity. It's happening now as we speak. Right, that's the drama, and when that drama comes to a successful conclusion, right, our enemies will fall like flies. Right, I have no doubt. Can I give you one last verse?
Yeah, I was actually, first of all, yes, but I also
second of all, we'd like to talk to you again, and third of all,
we'll come visit you in the frat. But also, we usually provide our guests with a verse to read. So you can read me yours, and then you'll read mine. Okay.
Well, check it out. In the 4th and final chapter of the book of Joel, right, it says there that at the end of times that God will bring all of the nations of the world to what's called the Valley of Jehoshaphat, right, which many of the commentators say is not even a real place. Jehoshaphat means Shaphat, meaning the Valley of Judgment. Yeah. It means that God will judge all of the nations at the end of time. For what? For two things that they did to us. One, for what they did to us by scattering us among the nations and persecuting us. That one they've been doing for a long time. But you know what the second thing is? Because they divided God's land. Exactly what the UN called on the whole world to demand of us to do this week, and what they continuously do. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris demanding a 2-state solution, that we should have a terror state right here in Efrat, right here in Bethlehem, where I live. Right, that, everybody, right, is in the book of Joel, and God is going to bring them to judgment at the end times. It's going to happen, right? That day is coming. These prophecies are not fantasy. We are living it right now as we speak.
Yeah, I feel it. Do you feel it?
What a merit to be alive at this painful time. It's a hard time, but let me tell you, our great-great-grandparents would have done anything to suffer through fighting. And through the Jewish people here in our homeland.
Is your community as fired up as you are?
Can what?
Is your community as fired up as you are?
Let me tell you, this is a fired up community, because here in Efrat, it's filled with a bunch of all the crazy Americans who said, we want this. And living in the center of Israel is not enough. We're going to live in Judea, right? There are more guns in this community of Americans than you'll find like in almost any place on earth. I think we have
more than Staten Island.
We got more guns than Texas here. It's an armory, my synagogue. So any Arab that shows up, if he's not coming for a good purpose, it's not going to end well for him. So no, I'm here with a bunch of crazy idealistic Americans and some of the most inspiring people on earth, including Rabbi D.
Yeah, but somehow you sound very sane. I don't know.
Rabbi D is just a little calmer and British, The Brits, we sound very calm and rational.
It's true. No, but you sound very sane. You sound actually very logical. I like it. Thank
you. Thank you. I don't get that too often, so I appreciate that. And really,
for us, yeah. Listen, I I just threw 2 quotes by Rav Kook, who you like, in the chat. I couldn't choose. Like as you were speaking, I was like, oh, no, the first, no, the second. So choose. I don't want to choose for you. You choose one of the 2 because they're both great.
Wow, no, these are amazing.
Yeah.
These are amazing. I'm going to go with the first. Great is my belief that all this global uproar of a time of the shifting world in which we live has come essentially only for Israel. We are now called upon to carry out a great task willingly and mindfully, to build ourselves and the entire ruined world along with us. Amen. Amen. We're on a mission.
Rabbi Elie Mischel. Wow. What a
thank you guys.
Such
a joy
great.
to
It's
talk
good
to
to meet you.
Really
Yeah,
enjoy
spend time with you.
And we got to do it together in person. Here in
we will.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, Seth is coming soon.
When I'm in town, we'll come see you, or you come
Please be in touch. We'll have a if as it gets cooler here, it's amazing in Efrat. We'll have a hot drink. My porch overlooks Jerusalem, and it's unbelievable. So let's do that together. And you know what? Your listeners are invited too.
Nice.
Everybody come join me for a hot drink.
Amazing. Well, it's happening. It's happening for sure. This is the good part of being part of the Jew function. So you never know when you're going to get invited to a hot drink in Judea.
Overlooking Jerusalem.
This just happened. So we want to thank our guest for his time and his passion and his heart. We're so happy to be part of the same circle with you. And I'm sure everybody listening is also.
Thank you, God, also for making it all happen.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's a real honor to be with you.
Yes, we are the Jew Function. Like, follow, share, comment, leave a review. You can listen to us on Spotify. Also, I want to mention 3 things. One, I remember you can listen to the episode with Charles Moskowitz, who also wrote a book about this unholy alliance between the progressives and the jihadists. You can listen to a talk we did with Reverend Haley Ace from the UK, who just loves the Jews. She would just like marry all the Jews if she could. An amazing woman, also powerful. I should put the 2 of you in touch because she's really like an amazing person.
Please do.
And also you can listen to a talk with Norma Livne, who wrote this book about Jewish self-hatred. So all great talks worth listening to. And of course, stay tuned for our next episode with the Jew Function. Take care.